Hello everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I talk about writing, books, philosophy, and pretty much whatever I want. My name is Kate. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, in today's video I'm going to be talking about the 12 books I read in September and October, featuring my Goodreads reviews. I won't be reading the entirety of my reviews. If you want to read them in their entirety, I'll have the link to my Goodreads in the description. Technically, I read 15 books between September and October because I read one of these books 4 times. We'll get into that a little later in the video though. So without further ado, let's jump into the reviews. The first book I read in September was a reread of The Angel's Game by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I've spoken about this book at length in other videos, so I won't talk about it here, but 5 stars, loved it, so good. The second book I read in September was Kabbalistic Astrology, which I think I talked about in my tier ranking 5-star books, and I did not leave a rating on this one. It's not really a book that I feel like you can rate really well, but I thought it was very interesting to read about the way that Kabbalistic teachings look at astrology. If you didn't know, I am a certified astrologer. Tell me that Mercury's in Gatorade in the comments below, please. Moving right along now to the actual reviews part. So the third book I read in September was Escaping from Houdini by Carrie Maniscalco. This is book 3 in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. I remember when I found out about this series, it was super random. I was just at my library and I saw the second one, Hunting Prince Dracula, advertised in the young adult section. Again, if you've been on my channel for a long time, you know, like anything that involves vampires, I am in. So I was like, what's that? And then I found out it was book 2, so I was like, all right, fine, I'll read the first one just so I can get to the second one. And then because I'm a completionist, I read book 3 after that, in September, obviously. I really enjoyed this one a lot. It's like the least well-reviewed of the 4 books in the series. I know why. By the way, there's not gonna be any spoilers in this video. I won't get into like the specifics of why this book is rated lower than the others, but I personally didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was necessary, the plot choices that Carrie Maniscalco chose to do with our 2 main characters, because like if you're writing a relationship over 4 books, you have to have all kinds of intrigue and twists and turns to keep us interested. So I said probably not a true 4-star, but somewhere slightly below. I'm not sure. This was a lot of fun. It's interesting. I wouldn't say this is one of my favorite series ever, but regardless of that fact, these books do stick with me. And that's so true. Like I read the first 2 books last year and I still remember everything that happened in those 2 books, and I usually read something and immediately forget. This book is surprisingly gory. I mean, okay, yes, what else can you expect from stories that center around serial killers and the 2 main characters perform post-mortems, but still they're young adult, and I guess that I was surprised. It's interesting because I feel like with young adult authors don't mind bringing the gory stuff, but when it comes to romance stuff, they don't, like, they really shy away from that. I don't know, it's like, why is one more okay than the other? I love stories that involve ships, and this one in the series takes place on the RMS Etruria, which was a real ship. A lot of things in this book I've come to find are real, or the author derived them from real people and history, but with bending the truth a little bit, which she addresses at the end of the book, which I appreciated. There's this thing in this book that really kind of bothered me. This story takes place in 1889. The book has pictures in it, and it references a lot of photos from this one tarot deck called the Rider-Waite tarot deck. That deck wasn't invented, it wasn't created until I think early 1900s. So that kind of bothered me, the inconsistency with the history, because tarot decks did exist before the Rider-Waite deck, but I get why the author used that deck, because tarot decks before the Rider-Waite one weren't super illustrated, like they didn't have a lot of imagery that was symbolic in a way that the Rider-Waite one was, so it made sense to me that she bent time a little bit, but she does that a lot in these books and she does address it, so like I guess I can, you know, give her a pass for that. But still, I knocked off I think a star or 2 because I was like, I felt the author could have also researched the cards better, because there certainly would have been cards that fit the story better than the one she used. Overall, this was a really fun read, and I'm looking forward to finishing the series sometime in the near future, which I did, and we will get to book 4 later in the video. The 4th book I read started it in September and I finished it October 7th, was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is Technically book 5 in the ACOTAR series, if you count A Court of Frost and Starlight. This one is from Nesta's perspective as opposed to Feyre, which is the perspective we've had up until book 5. And I was really excited to read this because Nesta was my favorite character. I saw right through her hard exterior and I knew what was going on with her. I knew there had to be more, and I was right. As always. This book really delved into her trauma and her overcoming that in the book, which I really enjoyed reading a lot. So I wrote, this is somewhere between 3.5 and 4 stars. Who knows, maybe my rating will change with time. And I thought the ending of ACOTAR was convoluted. Honestly, I really don't know how to summarize and voice my experience and feelings when it comes to this series. There are some genuine moments that I really, really love. I love the found family and the world that Sarah J. Maas has cultivated. I mean, this series had me wanting to order a Valaris t-shirt for fuck's sake. Sarah J. Maas isn't super consistent. She doesn't necessarily have the ability to really craft a magic system and world that totally makes sense and works. There's some things that are too convenient. And then once again, like all of the other books too, she gets really attached to certain phrases, which is interesting. I had no idea what was going on towards the end. The whole thing between Feyre and Rhysand in this book, which I won't spoil for you, I said I just don't know. The other thing too that I have an issue with in all of these books is that there really aren't ever any real stakes. Like, you always know that every character is gonna live, they're all gonna make it out alive. It's never really like their lives are never really in danger. I've spent most of this review so far talking about the things I had issues with or whatever, so let's shift. I loved watching Nesta change and grow. I loved her training sessions, how she dealt with her trauma, and I especially liked that chapter in Orid, which I've heard is that, like, a lot of people, that's their favorite chapter. It was actually really well done. It was suspenseful and creepy. Like, I actually felt creeped out reading it. And it was just really cool to watch Nesta get stronger and confront herself head on. I really liked that in this book. Oh, I also didn't know, so in this book, it was marketed as, I think, adult, as opposed to the other books, which were new adult or young adult. So like the spice in this book is ramped up to 100. Like, there's a lot of spice in this book, and some of it I was like, okay, this again? All right, I guess we're having the same thing on the menu again. Some of it I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty good. And then the rest of it I was like, okay, like I kind of started feeling a little gross, you know, like over like the halfway part. This book is like 800 pages, and I would venture to guess like a third of it is probably spice. I have never had such varied reactions to a series as I have to this one. By the end of this, I was just like, I was ready to be done with it. The pacing I felt was really weird. Again, I mean, I rated it 4 stars, but like, I think it's probably more of a 3.5 if I'm being honest. But it was really nice to finish the series because, again, I'm a completionist and I liked, you know, having all 5 books on my shelf and like, okay, those are all read. The ranking I have is A Court of Wings and Ruin is my favorite one, and then A Court of Frost and Starlight, I know, shocking, and then A Court of Silver Flames, and then A Court of Thorns and Roses, and A Court of Mist and Fury in last. The next book I read was Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. I finished this October 8th. This is like a classic vampire story that was told in the 1800s, so it's considered to be, like, I think part of the big 3. There's Dracula, Carmilla, and The Vampire by Polidori. And this one is unique because it's sapphic. There's an implied attraction and romance between the main protagonist and the vampire Carmilla. I don't have a lot to say about this book. I thought it was good. I thought it was too short. If it had been longer, I would have enjoyed it more because I want more vampire content. I wrote, there are other reviews I read about this book that are much funnier than mine ever would be, so I won't even try. Anyone who knows me well knows that I love vampires and vampire stories. Something about them, much like the creatures themselves, draws me in every time. This did a great job of illustrating the eerie quality of being stalked by one of these beings, and I love the book's setting. It is interesting though that this vampire chose to stalk young women in a remote area of Austria where there aren't really many people to begin with, which I thought was interesting. I read this all in one day. It's pretty short, like 120 pages or something. I rated it 3.5 stars. The next book I read in October, which I finished on October 9th, was Something in the Woods Loves You by Jared K. Anderson. I also talked about this book on my 5-star tier ranking video, so I won't talk about it too much. Basically, this book was just beautifully written. It's hard to rate a book like this because it's so personal, and it's a story of how Jared Anderson learned to cope and overcome and learn from his battle with depression and finding that the natural world, so like in the backyard of his house, the woods, animals, finding parallels between the world outside and himself, and that gave him the strength to overcome and to feel better and to cope. It's really beautifully written. I thought it was a little wordy at times, maybe a little too much, but the title itself was really what drew me to it in the first place, and the cover. I mean, it's such a beautiful cover. I've always loved the woods too. Like, every time I go to the woods in general, I just feel like I can breathe so much better. I feel like my muscles relax, like I'm at home, really. In my review, I have like a lot of my favorite quotes from the book. I recognize in Jared something I've long recognized in myself: resilience and curiosity, a desire to create meaning through that resilience and the things I learn. I love it when I know of other people who have done the same. I see the warrior in him that I also see in myself. This book, I think, is really important because it undoubtedly has helped so many people because of the subject matter. And I rated this 5 stars. Okay, the next book I read in October was my book, Under the Same Sky by Kate Hill, yours truly. Yeah, I rated this 1 star. No, I rated it 5 stars. It's my book. So this is the book that I read 4 times. So I read it 3 times in September and once in October because I published it on October 11th. So I had to reread it to do final edits for it. So that's why I didn't read a ton in September. I'll keep my review short because obviously I'm biased. I just said thank you so much for reading Under the Same Sky. I'm very proud of this book and I hope you enjoyed your time in 80 Town with Saren and all the characters. This is my first book, so it's very special to me. Thank you so much. And as always, if you would like to check out my book, it is a slow burn, small town, friends to lovers romance. I will have it in the description below. It's available on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. The next book I read in October, finished it October 17th, was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. I went on an interesting journey with this one. The first page sucked me in so quickly, I figured I'd really love this. The following chapters, especially when they became very academic, had me skimming the text. That's the thing about this series, or at least the first book, is that it's written sort of like an encyclopedia. It's sort of dry, it's very academic, it's not overly flowery, which I know can really rub some people the wrong way, and it's just like, I don't want to read an encyclopedia. It was hard for me initially to like either Emily or Wendell. Emily is a bit cold and robotic, and Wendell gives pretty boy lazy, ungrateful energy. At this point, what kept me reading were 2 things. 1, I knew that this book is extremely popular, and I wanted to have my own opinion on it. And 2, the way Heather Fawcett writes scenery and setting is so lovely. This setting is probably what I love most about the book and the way that it's written. My favorite character was Poe, in case anybody was wondering. Justice for Poe. He was so cute. I really didn't care for Wendell very much though, until like halfway through he does something to protect Emily, and I was like, oh, okay, that was hot. I also had him on my tier ranking book boyfriends video, if you want to check that out. I had such a fun time making that video. And yeah, Wendell was on the list. He wasn't in S tier though, I'll just say that. This was surprisingly brutal at times, which I liked. It was also strange though, because I'm pretty sure this is a cozy fantasy, so having coziness and violence side by side was an interesting combo. I think of all the cozy fiction I've read so far, this is my favorite. The stakes aren't super high, but they were high enough in this. I still don't really know if cozy fiction is for me, but I'll keep reading it to find out. Yeah, that's the thing, it's like, why read a book if the stakes aren't there? You know, like, the vibes need to be immaculate if there are going to be no stakes. This one, I felt like the vibes were pretty good for the most part, but because it was academic, and because I didn't really like either of our 2 main characters, it's just kind of like, Okay, like I considered DNFing it a fourth of the way through. As a side note, I loved how Fawcett described Emily going back to the cottage at the beginning of the book. She always described the warmth of returning, and I don't know, that struck me. It really did. That was the coziest part for me, was when she was alone, building the fire, being all cozy with her dog Shadow. That was my favorite part. And when Wendell, did what he did midway through the book. There was a quote in this I really liked. "One doesn't need magic if one knows enough stories." I rated Emily Wilde's 4 stars. The next book I read and finished October 21st was Capturing the Devil, which is book 4 in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Carrie Maniscalco. I loved this book. I'm surprised because, like I said, I didn't read this series thinking that it was going to be a new favorite, but I find myself missing reading these books, and I don't really even know why, because I don't really care about mysteries. I don't really care about who done it. I don't like reading about a lot of gore, but these are very gory. I think somewhere in my review I'm like, chapter 1 made me feel queasy. So the first 2 take place in Europe, the third one takes place on a ship, and the fourth one takes place in New York and Chicago in the 1880s. Each one centers on a different killer, sort of. I don't want to spoil anything, obviously. This one goes into depth with a really well-known serial killer in Chicago at the time, so I kind of already knew who the killer was, but this one was easily my favorite. I was legitimately scared in certain points. My first paragraph in my review is I finished reading this late tonight and jumped at every noise my apartment made as I read. I was also reading close to a window that people outside could see in if they walked by, which made me uneasy. This book suffered from being only slightly overwritten, and the pacing at times was a bit off, but at the same time I can easily see why the story had the twists and turns it did. And then I just had a bunch of questions about the text, because there were some, I felt things that weren't answered, or some inconsistencies. Nothing too huge, Overall, I think the series was honestly brilliant. What a cool series with so much suspense, mystery, and twists and turns. I very much liked the romance was ramped up in this. Of course, it's still young adult, so it's not a court of silver flames, it's not that much, but there's still more romance in this one than the other 3. Maniscalco did such an amazing job weaving these books together with real life historical people and stories. There's a reveal in this book that sort of twists the story of book 1 on its head, and I thought it was perfect. I thought it was the best choice that Carrie Maniscalco could have made. Again, this book and the third book are not as well rated as the first 2. I think the second one is the best rated. I liked each book for different reasons, so because of that, I don't know if I could rank them. Book 1 felt the grittiest. Book 2 had a nice coziness to it. Book 3 was the most whimsical, and book 4 was easily the scariest. Very happy I randomly saw Hunting Prince Dracula displayed at my library and decided to pick up this series that I otherwise wouldn't have picked up. So today's message is to pick up books that you wouldn't normally read, I guess. I rated this 4.5 stars. Okay, the next book I read in October, finished on October 23rd, was The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. And you know what? For this one, I am going to get the book. The thing is with this book, I was expecting that I would hate it, not only because it's a classic, and classics are sort of hit or miss for me, but because everyone and their mother hates this book, or at least that's the reputation that it has. This is about a young boy, he's 16 in the 1940s, who is just so lost in his life. He doesn't have anyone to talk to. He's very lonely. He keeps flunking out of schools, and it's just his story of the things that he lived through as a teenage boy. From what I understand, another reason why this book is controversial, it was banned at some point because it has a lot of foul language in it, but also because apparently 2 different murderers said that they really loved this book, or that it inspired them to kill people. And all I have to say to that is, first of all, the Bible has probably inspired, more people to kill than Catcher in the Rye has, but also I think that was already within those people anyway. This has over 1 million reviews, so 2 people out of 1 million. I mean, I think it's a moot point. When I finished this, I went out and I bought my own copy because I was I need to own that and I need to reread it at some point. I was not expecting to like this. I wasn't expecting to pick it up either. I just randomly saw it at my library and I was like, you are coming home with me. And I even thought about making an entire video on The Catcher in the Rye, because I was the reviews that I had seen of people talking about this book just didn't get it, which I think really plays into the themes in this book. I'm so torn in my rating for this. I'm tempted to give it a 5-star, but I think I need to think on it a bit. Before I continue, this book has been out for over 50 years, so if you're worried about spoilers, too bad. This book is often disliked because the protagonist is unlikable. I didn't have any issue with that. That's sort of the point at times. We don't need every character to be good for us to care about them, and I very much cared about Holden. He kind of broke my heart a little bit. I found myself wanting to sit down with him and ask him what was wrong, or to help him through everything that he clearly hasn't processed, from his mentioning the physical and implied sexual abuse that he endured, to his brother dying, or just everything. He clearly just needed someone to listen to him. In this book, he's constantly searching for connection in a world that seems bent on ignoring him, calling him weird or whatever. Holden is only 16 though, so I can completely understand how he probably just doesn't have the language or understanding yet of how to help himself or articulate what's going on in his head. I wanted to cry when he dropped the record in Central Park and it shattered. And I want to cry now thinking about it. I just had this image of a lonely boy in the middle of an empty park with snow all around, with not even the ducks to keep him company, and the small devastation of breaking a gift he meant to give to his sister. This book is clearly about a lot of things. It's about loneliness, leaving childhood behind, connection, and an inability to find oneself in this chaotic world. I could absolutely relate to Holden's inability to find these things or to make sense of them. When he said all he wanted to do was be a catcher in the rye, I felt that. I've often struggled with putting what I actually want into words, and I loved the way this book ended. Some of the quotes that I love. Anyway, I like it now, I said. I mean right now, sitting here with you and just chewing the fat and horsing. That isn't anything really. It is so something really. Certainly it is. What the hell isn't it? People never think anything is anything, really. I'm getting goddamn sick of it. Certain things should stay the way they are. You ought to be able to stick them in one of those big glass cases and just leave them alone. I know that's impossible, but it's too bad anyway. I relate to that so much. There's so many things in this world I'm like, you should never change. I just want to protect you and keep you frozen in time as you are. This book said so much about confusion, longing, resilience, unresolved pain, and youth. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think I want to buy a copy from my shelves. Well, I did immediately after I wrote this review. And that's what I mean about the reviews that I was seeing about this, of people being like, oh, I just don't like Holden. He's such an asshole. It's like, you don't understand what's going on inside this child's mind. Like, he needs help. That's the point of this novel, is that he can't get anyone to understand him, and all these people in the reviews that I've seen talking about this book don't understand him and don't like him. This is easily one of my new favorite books. I rated it 4 stars. I think probably just because this is about a teenage boy and I am not a teenage boy. There was some kind of a disconnect there, but the pain and the confusion and the loneliness that he feels in this is universal. So yeah, if you have been afraid of reading this, or you read it in high school and you hated it, try giving it another read, because I think it is totally worth it. Okay, my camera needed a break and now the lights are on. Hopefully the lighting is still okay, but yeah, so how are you doing? You doing good? I hope you're doing good. Let's continue. The next book I read in October and finished October 27th was Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid, and there's a glare on this. I had to show you this cover. Look at this. That is absolutely stunning. I saw this in Barnes & Noble and I really wanted to buy my own copy, but I didn't because I've been trying to not buy books, and as it so happened, my library had a copy and I was like, hell yeah, because this just came out. This is a retelling of Macbeth by Shakespeare. If you don't know, I am a massive Shakespeare fan. I have done a ton of Shakespeare's plays, so I know a lot about his work in general. The cover immediately drew me to this book when I first saw it. So I'm a massive fan of Shakespeare's work, and it just doesn't get much better than the original Macbeth, or anything he has written for that matter. This book is marketed as a retelling, which maybe it is, but there are some major differences between the original and this. First, Lady Macbeth is in her 30s or 40s in the original. Macbeth is seen as a coward because he can't kill Duncan, and Lady Macbeth has a child with him. One of my favorite monologues goes over this. For me. retelling. So that led me to consider this book as its own thing. Sure, it's a retelling, but not really. There's infinitely more magic in this, including dragons and unicorns. Lady Macbeth is 17 and markedly less intimidating and resourceful than Shakespeare's Lady Macbeth. Still though, I was able to consider this its own thing because really, if you're going to approach Shakespeare, you should do so carefully and competently. I'm not entirely sure what exactly the point of this book was. If it was to serve up gothic vibes, it definitely did that. If it's just to make Lady Macbeth more badass, well, that didn't really need to be done. She's an absolute powerhouse in the original play, perhaps even more so than Lady Roseal, who's Lady Macbeth. If it was to be a tale of women empowerment, well, it did that, though Lady Roseal never... We don't really know exactly why she plots what she plots in this. She has powers in this. I don't know how to talk about them without like ruining them, but it just never... It felt like it never like quite reached a fever pitch, you know what I mean? Overall, the reason I'm giving this book 5 stars is because it spoke to me on a lot of levels. I loved these quotes. "You are beautiful," he whispers. "She does not know what compels her to whisper back, strange, unnatural. No," he says, "you have been made to fit a shape that confines you, that does not serve you." I loved that. "So you are no mortal man. I have seen what mortal men can do. I prefer a monster that shows itself openly." The ending of this, beautiful, stunningly written, no notes, amazing. Thank you, Ava Reed, for blessing us. This had a bit of everything I like in a book. Monsters, magic, romance, gothic tones and scenery, Scotland, history, beautiful writing, and a female protagonist I could relate to. 5 stars. Will be buying my own copy. I loved it. The last book I read in October, which I finished on October 27th, was Becoming the Dark Prince, which is 3.5 in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. It's a novella after the 3rd book. I probably should have read it then, but I didn't know it existed until after I read the 4th one. Yeah, we're gonna keep this real simple. I just said quick, sweet read from Thomas's perspective. I wish there was more. I rated it 4 stars. Those are all the books that I read in September and October. I also started reading Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. I started that on my Kindle. Also from my library. Mwah. Thank you, library. And I also started the 4th book in the Cemetery of Forgotten Books series by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. Again, if you know, you know. This is my favorite author. This is a very long book. It's like 800 pages. I figured I would make this video while it is still October because I'm probably not going to be finishing either of them before November 1st. Oh yeah, and by the way, November is upon us. I don't know where October went. Honestly, 2 of the best reading months I feel like I've had all year. I got some new favorites. There was nothing that I overtly disliked. It was all just so nice and cozy. The vibes were there. It was just everything that I could have wanted. So I want to thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. Like I said, if you want to check out my Goodreads or my book or any of my social media stuff, all of the links are in the description. Comment down below what you have been reading lately, what you are going to be reading, or just let me know how you are doing. I would love to know. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that bell so you know when I will be posting next. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.